Welcome back to Project Daily Drive, where today we're going to make a start on tackling the myriad of issues that Jean has while she's off the road. And the first issue, as you can see by the title, going to take aim at the windscreen wipers. What's wrong with the wipers? Well, if they're working absolutely perfectly, they're not great. This car dates from the 1940s, well, the design does, even if this is a 66 model. But the wipers didn't really change all that much throughout the years. It's a single speed wiper motor, which means that they go at one speed only, and they're very basic, very short rubber blades. You can actually see this windscreen is quite small. It's only that big, whereas the windscreen on a modern car is actually closer to being square. It's almost as tall as it is wide, it's just at such a steep angle. The problem I've got, simply enough, is that the motor in it is a bit wimpy and these wipers struggle. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Now, I have a couple of options that I could have here. I could replace this, as a lot of people do, with a 2-speed wiper motor setup, which, while a good idea, it cost me. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go with the second option. I've bought a refurb kit and I'm going to refurb the wipers. So in this episode, I'm going to take the wiper motor out, strip it, rebuild it, and I'm also going to take out the rack and wheel boxes and clean them up as well. I'm not looking forward to that job, I've been told it's awful. So let's have a look at the wipers themselves working to see what the problem is. Got to confess something moving forward. First things first, I said I'd take the wheel boxes off the car. I'm not doing that today. So this is something going forward I should probably talk about. I can't really work on the car for long periods of time at the moment, and that's because, well, I don't know if you can see there, but you can see here it's freezing out, and anytime it's not freezing out, it's been raining. I can't work on the car for too long because my back locks up in the cold. As much as I want to work on it, my legs go out from underneath me. I think I mentioned it in the video as well. So you might hear that later down the line. It's actually taken me about 3 days to do this in total because it's either been raining or I've locked up. So just something worthwhile knowing going forward. So I'm not going to be necessarily working on the car, but I will be working on parts of the car that I'm going to pinch off it and work on indoors where it's warmer. It's not about being a wuss because I don't mind the cold. It's just working in the cold causes my back to lock up, which causes my legs to lock up because I have sciatica. This is one of the joys of owning a classic car when you have a disability. It kind of is inconvenient. But anyway, just thought I'd let you know before carrying on with the video. Hello. I know the reflections don't really show off to me too well, but we're looking at these wipers here. So, what's the issue with them? Well, that is the issue with them. Moreover, they shouldn't be that slow. The hand pump windscreen wiper thing is real stiff on this. I need to tackle that in another episode. There we go. Right. If I lubricate the windscreen, you can see that they'll start to speed up a little bit. But you can see that they're not going to the full rake of the windscreen. If I keep doing this, they'll eventually start to go to the full rake. But they're not doing very much. They're really slow. And in really heavy rain, snow or really light rain, you can see now they're moving properly. But you can see that they're really weak. They shouldn't be this weak and they shouldn't be this slow. They should be a bit faster than this and certainly have a bit more power than this, but they don't. The wiper motor is probably the original, which means it's been in this car for 53 years. The wheel boxes are almost certainly original, so everything could do with the strip out, clean up, grease up, and hopefully it'll work a lot better. First job, I've got to get in there and take the wiper motor out. Oh God, it's a pain. Now you can see what the state of the rubber is, and as you can see, this means that the wiper motor flexes around a lot, and that means that a lot of the power will be lost and it'll be straining. I've also got my cat trying to climb in the engine bay. Rosie. This is Rosie. Say hello. Little pain. Right. Let's get the right bolts and strip that out. So it's time for the first speed up of the episode. So to remove the wiper motor, there's 3 bolts underneath. They are tiny and they are covered in the goopy residue of the old rubber mounts. The first one was the easiest to get out. I could just get that one out with a normal bit, but then the rear two were really hard to get out. I actually had to use a screwdriver bit and an extension to get them out through the suspension. You could just see there I was struggling to get it out with the normal socket. So this is why you're only going to see my shoulder. I didn't realise until afterwards how bad the footage was, which is why I cut it off pretty quickly. But just so you know, I had to use the extension to get in underneath there. And you can see how oily and horrible it all is. Well, let's get back to it. Sorry I had to cut the time lapse short, but the only way I could get in was blocking the camera. I didn't have anywhere else to put the camera. Now it's free. I think I need to turn that round. There we go. Hello. As you can see, it's free now. There's no bolts holding it down. The rubber mounting points were essentially destroyed. And these were impossible to get to. I'm not even going to lie. These were just horrific to get at. And everything is a bit shaky because I had to bend down and I've kind of set my back off. So I've got about 2 hours before I can walk again. But anyway, the only thing to do now is to disconnect the loom. Now I've taken a photograph of the loom so I know which way the wires need to go back, but you can always check the bibble, which is the workshop manual, if you don't remember. So now I need to take the cover plate off to remove the rack from the motor, and then I can take the motor out in one piece. This will be fun. So to remove the rack, you actually have to remove the cover, which is just held in place by 4 1/4-inch bolts, which are easy enough to get out. Take the cover off, and then there's a much larger bolt there at the end, which I'm using an AJ to take off. Once you've done that, the actual rack will unhook from the motor, but you can't really see it here. Ta-da! Disconnected it completely. Here it is. It's quite a substantial hunk of kit. Now, I have rebuilt it, but that's just so I can dismantle it on the desk in closer detail for you all. The rack will be coming out next. I'm actually not going to be doing that today, but for you, you'll see it straight away. And then we'll get on with cleaning up the wiper motor, stripping it down and rebuilding it. Oh, that took too long. I need a coffee. Here I am in the great outdoors in this nice covered canopy because it's the only place I'm allowed to work on the oily bits. If you're wondering what's behind me, that's my spare grill. There's Morris Minor parts all over the place. Anyway, beside the point. Here's the wiper motor that I hoiked out, and it's heavy. I'm pretty sure this is the original because really there isn't any indication that it isn't, and I just like to hope it is. So we have to assume that this has been on the car for 53 years and it's never had a service. Going off what's on the inside, I'm inclined to agree. I'll just rip this thing open so you can see kind of the state of it. But what I've got here is I've got some ludicrously hot water, I've got some light degreaser, some heavy Swarfiga degreaser. And what we're going to do is all the parts in here that aren't electrical, I'm going to strip out and completely degrease because the grease in there has gone thick and heavy. It's like very, very tough. I'm going to clean it all up and flush out the bearings and stuff just to see if I can get it a bit nicer looking. It's also filthy. Look at the state of my hands. This is just removing a wiper motor. It's got so much muck on there. So get me tools, strip it open, and you can have a look at what's on the inside. And then we're going to clean. This is the type of cleaning I enjoy. I hate vacuuming. To take the cover off, it's 4 1/4-inch screw bolts. Is it a screw? Is it a bolt? That is the question. I'm just going to call them bolts because screws for me are either crosshead or flathead, you know, Phillips or flathead, but these are hex heads, so yeah. Anyway, that's the top. Now I'm going to rip this off. That's horrible. Let me show you actually. This is what it looks like on the inside of the wiper motor. Black, tar-like, rusty, gritty grease. It feels gritty and awful. You can actually see in there the spindle for the motor. So what I'm going to do, just to save everyone a little bit of time, is I'm going to do another time lapse where I just clean, because there's going to be nothing interesting to say while I'm cleaning bits. See you guys. Oh, no, actually, before I do the time lapse, this is the state of the old mounting points. They were completely torn apart. As you can see, they are, if my camera will focus. Focus. Focus! It's not going to focus, is it? Come on, focus on that. Yeah, close enough. They're really chewed up and they're really gooey and just nasty. They've completely deteriorated. So I have bags of new mounting points to go on once I've cleaned this up. I just dropped it. Right, time lapse begin. Right, so I'm sorry about the massive amounts of speed ups in this episode, but really all I'm doing here is cleaning all of the parts. I used very hot water and degreaser to try and break down this grease because it was so thick, and I realise now that that was the worst thing to do, really. I did get through in the end, taking the parts out of the motor, scrubbing them with degreaser. It got rid of most of the grease, but it was so thick and heavy that it was just tedious and slow and awful, and I won't be doing this again. I'm going to actually get some proper degreaser for when I do other oily parts, because this just is awful. As you can see, I replaced the water with scorching hot just to help break down that grease, and it did work. I got most of the parts nice and clean. Me chatting with my dad there. He's bringing me some pliers because I needed to break the actual rotor arm down, which you just saw me do there. So now I'm just wiping all of the parts off, making sure they're perfectly dry, otherwise they would have rusted. These are the bits of the rotor. And once I've cleaned them up and dried them off, give them a spray down with oil, and that makes sure that, well, it's nice and clean. Okay, that is clean. No real grease. There's a bit of grease, but not aiming for perfection. I just wanted to get all of it out. Bushings look okay. All of these parts have been given a light oil so that they won't rust. And now I've got the motor, which I'm going to, once I've just started a bit of cleaning out on it, I'm going to rebuild in my office so I can get all the electrics working, and then it can go back on the car. Right, so I decided to speed this one up because I was just waffling on and it went on too long. Essentially what I'm doing here is breaking down the motor by taking the rotor out. Now the rear bearing, as I was showing off there, was actually so full of old grease and oil that I couldn't pull it apart by hand, so I had to pull out the rotor the other way by hand, full of very thick, very horrible grease. So I cleaned that out, as you can see right here, and then popped off the end bearing cap, which was full of gunk and grease. Off screen I flushed that out and put in new fresh oil and take a sip of my brew. Now I have to replace the bushings. Now the brushes are made of carbon, and the old ones were so worn out they were actually almost touching the metal holders. They'd worn down by over half. You'll see in a moment me holding them up. So to remove them I just used some needle nose pliers and then some normal pliers. I had to wiggle them out. I didn't want to break them in case the new ones weren't right. There we go, I pulled it out. And then it was just a simple matter of taking the new ones and popping them in by hand, which was a little bit fiddly because they're not quite the same size, but it worked in the end. I managed to pop them in, so I took out the other one, which was easier, and then popped the new brush in. In fact, you can see, there you go, the comparison between the sizes. I know it was a bit short. And then just popped the rotor back in after cleaning off all the oil. I went back and cleaned it again off camera. And that's the motor, so on to doing other stuff. So we've got the motor here, fitted the brushes, as I'm sure you all saw. Now I'm going to put the motor back together. Here is the back plate. Now, the oil light bearing in the back plate is surrounded by a sponge. So I've had that soaking in essentially engine oil, which is a very thick but very slick oil. So that's absorbed into the bearing nicely. Cleaned all the gunk out, so this just presses in. Hopefully you can see that. Press that in and there we go. Perfect. Ta-da! Now the other side. Once again, oil light bearing surrounded by a sponge, and this goes in this way. I just need to press this in. There we go. The reason I decided to squash it is because there was probably some oil still in the middle of the bearing. Yep, it's been squeezed out, so I've got a thing next to me for all of the oil drips. There we go. So push this back on. Perfect. Bolts. Here's the bag of bits. I haven't got any tools with me just yet, but don't worry. Right, the bag of bolts. This is bolt number 1. This needs to go up top here. It has the earth connection. There you go. I'll rebuild one of these in full detail sometime. It's been given a light coating of oil to prevent it from further corrosion. Once again, I decided to do another speed up because I just went on for ages and ages, cleaned up all the stuff that had oil on it, and started putting the thing back together by putting both ends in, so the end cap bearing and the main rotor housing screwed in, and then I have to put in the rotor, but of course I need to rebuild the rotor because I broke it apart, so this was why I sped it up, because this took on so long. Parts of the rotor are actually completely worn out. That's the bushing I was just going to point out. It's completely worn out and does actually need replacing, but I didn't have the part, so in the future I'm going to go back and replace that and repaint the actual wiper motor itself. So by putting it all together, new circlips and all of that, and then put it back in the motor. Here you go. And now I've pretty much got it back together. Just the locking nut in place and then the cover plates. And now I just need to go fill it with grease. Now for the gross bit. I got my grease gun because I took all that horrible old grease out. Now I've got to put the new grease back in. I wish I knew where my big tub of grease was, because then I wouldn't have to use my grease gun for this job, but hey ho, I need to fill that with grease, this channel with grease, and then grease on top. Lots of grease. Grease everything. Right, I've temporarily wired this thing up. The reason I say I've temporarily wired it up is purely because, well, I want to know if it works. Right. Shall we see if it works? Well, it's moving. It's not going anywhere. Oh dear, hang on. That's not good. Spins! That's fast. That's very fast. So now, let's have a look. Right, let me figure this one out off camera because I'm being a bit of an idiot. Righty then, so we're almost at the end. I wanted to show, I've put some new stands in because the original ones were really crusty, rusty, horrible, and you can get new ones. Now, just so you know, the threads on these aren't actually the same. You've got to force it in there because modern stuff. Anyway, brand new bolts, brand new threads, all galvanised. Now, one thing you notice that I didn't show is that I put the grommets in. Let's see, if you look there, here we are. These are the grommets. I've put these in. The reason I didn't show you putting them in is because that was the worst job ever, and you couldn't have seen anything because I was right in here trying to force freezing cold rubber in. So I had a hairdryer and a hot water tank, and it was just the worst. I haven't put the top grommet in properly yet, but that's just because it's so cold I can't manipulate that in. So I'm not going to show you putting this back in because it's the exact same process as taking it out and you won't be able to see anything. So I'll meet you when it's all plugged in and we can test it out. Okay, it's in, it's solid, as you can see. Barely moving, but it's still got enough rubber mounts in it so it's not going to be bouncing around. I'll close the bonnet and we can test out the wipers. Woohoo! So, Sorry about the condensation on the windscreen because it's freezing out. Let's test out the wipers. So, ignition on. Straight off the bat, they've got way more power. Let's lubricate the windscreen with the wipers, with the washers. And straight off the bat, there was loads more power. They were going much further on the rake than they were originally. I haven't messed with anything here. It's exactly the same circumstances. And fantastic. So that wiper over there needs resetting because it's not quite working properly. But the actual wipers themselves, much better and much quieter as well. It's a lot quieter than it was before. Result, I have some much better wipers. I'll have to tackle the wheel boxes when it's not so freezing cold so that I don't lock up. But I'm happy with how that's turned out. Cracking job. And we're finished. I have actually completed the wipers. So there's more work to do. Still need to refurb the wheel boxes, for example. I need to get the wipers to actually sit on the windscreen properly, but that's for in the summer. So that's it for today. Now I want to know, what do you want to see for the next video? I have a few options. I could work on repainting the wheels. I have a carburetor rebuild kit. I have quite a number of options. Rebuilding the interior, working in the boot, lots of stuff. I've got loads of plans. Let me know what you want, because, well, I want to get some more involvement. I'm probably, if I don't really hear much, I'm probably going to start tackling the ignition, not the ignition, the fuel side. So fuel pump needs a rebuild, carburetor needs a rebuild, getting the engine running a bit better. Well, we shall see. So thank you very much for watching. I'm going to get out the cold now. See you next time. It's cold out here.